Hello, Vosnasenka, and welcome to week 4 of your language arts class. Let's get into it. This week you have this video that you're going to watch, and you're going to answer some discussion questions. On Tuesday, you're going to read 2 articles and compare them and answer some questions about those. On Wednesday, you will have part 2 of this video and a mentor sentence to complete. Thursday, you will have an argument and a paragraph, and Friday, you will work on iReady and submit your notebook. So let's go ahead and look at your notebook. If you don't already have your notebook open, go ahead and pause this video and find your notebook. All right, so now we have our week 4 notebook in front of us. You'll notice you're reading George Washington, Little Mouth of Horrors today from Georgia Bragg's How They Croaked. And that is something you'll be working on here in a minute. So there are some questions. Instead of doing summary notes on that text, you're actually going to just answer a few questions about it this week. So there are 3 questions here. I want you to pay attention to how George Washington is described. What is one major contradiction about his life? A contradiction is two things that seem like they shouldn't be true together. That they seem like they're opposites. They seem like they should cancel each other out, but they don't. And then the last one is, how did Washington die and how did the doctors help him? So those are the questions you'll be answering today after you read George Washington's Little Mouth of Horrors. Then for tomorrow, as I said, you will be reading 2 of these articles and answering questions. Actually, one of them is a video. And you'll be answering these questions about it. I will go through those questions momentarily. On Wednesday, your next video, we will go through this mentor sentence together, and I will go over how to write this argument in a paragraph on your Wednesday video as well. Okay, so now would be a very good time to pause this video and watch, or read, sorry, I keep saying watch, and read George Washington, Little Mouth of Horrors. Feel free to use the audio version if you need to. All right, now that you have finished reading George Washington, Little Mouth of Horrors, I want you to answer these 3 questions in your notebook for the discussion questions this week. Remember, when I talk about how George Washington is described, I want you to think about his personality, not like how he looked. We know kind of what George Washington looks like. He's on our dollar bills, right? This isn't uncommon information. I want to know how he is described as a person, his personality, his character. What is he like? From that story, anyways. Second question, one major contradiction about George Washington's life. Think about how we remember him as the man who led the Continental Army against the British, and won the Revolutionary War, and then became the first president of our country. He was known, and still is known, for his fighting for freedom. So specifically think about that, how he was fighting for freedom. What is something about his life that might be a contradiction to that? Something that is an opposite. Another way to think about this is, was he a hypocrite in any way? A hypocrite is where you preach one something, or you say other people should do something, but you don't do it or don't actually believe it yourself. The third question, how did he die, right? So what actually kills him in the end? And how did doctors help him? I'm going to tell you that last part of that, how doctors helped him in his death, is a bit of a trick question. I'll leave it at that. I'll see if you can figure it out. So go ahead and pause the video now and answer those 3 questions in your notebook. Okay, so then what you will be doing tomorrow is the article comparison. So I want to go over those questions with you today so that you're understanding how to do them. And then you can also review this video tomorrow if you need to. So there are 4 different sources here. 3 of them are articles, 1 of them a video. All of them present generally the same information about George Washington, but in different ways. So one of the big things that we're trying to learn this quarter is that articles present information differently, even if they're presenting the same information. If you have 2 reporters that report on the exact same event that's happening, the stories will come back very, very different. And you can do that now. You could go look up an event that happened last week on different news sources and read the stories, and you'll notice that they're very different, even though they're reporting the same information. So when you read these articles, I want you to keep in mind of their differences, not necessarily their similarities, right? So they're all going to tell us about George Washington, what he was like. All of these articles specifically deal with the fact that George Washington had slaves in his lifetime, which is not generally a common piece of information about George Washington. We tend to not think about that or remember that when we talk about him and teach him in a historical perspective, because we think about him as a father of our nation, the hero that, won the Revolutionary War, not someone who also endorsed, supported slavery, or had slaves anyways, even if he didn't support it. So these 4 articles all discuss the idea that George Washington had slaves in his lifetime. And so you need to read 2 of them, right? And answer the 6 questions, because I want you to compare the articles, compare their differences. What do they do to persuade you to feel a certain way about that concept about George Washington? All right. So what is the author's purpose? So let me go over the 6 questions that you'll be answering now so that you make sure that you understand those questions. So what is the author's purpose of each? An author's purpose is, ideally in an article, the purpose is just to inform us. Well, that's not true, as we've been discussing, right? So in these articles, think about, what does the author want to do while they're presenting this information? What are they trying to convince us of? What are they trying to persuade you to think or feel? That might be the author's purpose. Last week, 2 weeks ago, when you read the article about Christopher Columbus, and we talked about in that video that the purpose of that article was to sort of villainize Columbus, to make him seem like a bad guy, to make him seem like he was a liar and deceptive. So that was the author's purpose. What are the purposes of these articles that you read about George Washington? The next question, what information is included in some articles and left out of others, or in one of the articles that you read, right? So specifically, we will have in articles where certain information, true information, will just be left out, so that everything that they're saying is technically true, but any information, anything that happened that might contradict the author's purpose, again, counteract it, cancel it out, they will just keep out. They just won't talk about in their article. Or the other thing that will happen is that they will bury information at the very bottom of the article, which means that it's not as important, as not as many people will read it. I took a journalism class in college, and one of the first things we learned was that you always put the most important information in the first 2 paragraphs of an article, the most important information that you want people to read, because something like 70% of people don't read all of a news article. They only read the first couple of paragraphs to kind of get the gist of what happened. So if an author purposely puts information at the very end of an article, they are clearly saying this information is not important, and I'm trying to hide it, hoping that not that many people will read it, or hoping by the time you get to that part, you will already be convinced of my perspective and not really care about this other information. Okay. Which article has more emotionally charged words and why? Thinking back to that Columbus article too, there was words like deception and liar and trickery. Those are emotionally charged words. So words are emotionally charged if they make you feel either negatively or positively about the thing. We've talked about how different words can have sort of almost exactly the same meaning, but they have different connotation or different feelings associated with them. So an example would be the word accident and the word miracle. Those both almost mean the same thing. There's something that wasn't supposed to happen and it did. However, if you assign the word miracle to it, people think that it was a good thing that happened. And if you assign the word accident to it, people automatically think that it is a bad thing that happened. Okay. And the last 3 questions. What argumentative techniques do each of the articles use that you read? Remember to last week's videos where we talked about logos, pathos, and ethos. So which of those techniques are they utilizing? We have logos, which is a lot of logic and reasoning, if-then statements, a lot of facts, a lot of data. We have pathos, which is the emotional persuasion. So if an article is extremely passionate or sounds really angry or really disgusted, that voice, that tone would be an emotional persuasion. An article that has more emotionally persuasive words and emotionally charged words, that would be using pathos, right? And then ethos is using credibility. That would be, you know, having really, really good punctuation and grammar, sounding confident, having a lot of confidence in your writing, being someone that is known as being someone you can trust already, things like that. The next 2 questions are based solely on your opinion. So which of the 2 articles you read do you think is more convincing and why? What made it more convincing to you? And then the final question is, what article do you agree with personally? So tomorrow, and if you have time today, you can obviously start it. You're going to choose 2 of the 4 articles to read, or there is a video, or watch. And then you will answer these 6 questions for it.